Students of Reddit, what is something your teacher did that really pissed the whole class? Story 1. None of my teachers kept us in the whole lunch period, but it was common for a teacher to keep us in for a part of it if the class was misbehaving or noisy. This was a problem because the lunch line would get incredibly long if you didn't get to it right away. Being at the back of the line meant having almost no time to eat. You'd spend most of the time waiting in line, as well as the most popular foods running out completely. Sometimes, if you were really late, there would only be 1 or 2 things left. Always the grossest stuff that no one wanted to eat. I have some sensory issues and anxiety. The former meant that getting to lunch could mean having no main dishes available that I could eat, and the latter meant that it felt like twice as big of a deal. One teacher would be holding us in to punish the class for various things and notice me trying my best not to completely panic from the anxiety. From then on, he'd tease me in front of the class or draw attention to me every time we got held in, even a minute. I'm not sure he meant to be malicious about it, but as a super shy kid that was already unpopular, I absolutely hated it. Story 2. This one's a favorite. Post-English class. Break starts, I remain at my desk and do the homework the teacher assigned. Break ends, the teacher comes back and sees I've done the homework already. She waits for all the class to come back. Then she shouts, since Emery has already done the homework, "You all get 2 extra pages." Needless to say, that didn't improve my bullying situation. So, for clarification, it was middle school in Italy. I was 12 at the time. It definitely was not a lot of homework. Don't remember how much, but probably around 5 pages of English grammar exercises, fill in the gaps, turn adjective into adverb, etc. So it was easy. Most pupils who liked the subject would be able to do it in a 15-minute break. Reasons? To this day, I have no clue. But teachers and pupils bullied me terribly in that school. I do remember my parents telling me she was probably bitter because I could speak and understand English better than her. Could have been the case. Could have not. I don't remember. But she surely didn't like me. Yelled at me for no reason, called me stupid, laughed when other kids bullied me, or actually got mad at me when I got bullied. It means you did something to piss them off. It's safe to say that this wasn't an actual thought through pedagogic decision gone wrong. Story 3. At university, my professor did not tell us the time of our examination, despite numerous emails from 20-odd students, as well as the head professor of the course. This exam could have been any time from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and I lived 90 miles from campus and relied on crap public transport to get into uni. It got to 9 p.m. the day before the exam. No one knew when the exam would be, and if we missed it, we would fail the whole module. So I took the train to the city where my uni is. Booked a cheap, shitty hotel room for the night, just to make sure I was there on time. We all took the exam at 12 p.m., after getting an email an hour before the exam was being held, so I wouldn't have made it in time if I stayed at home. The worst part was that no one cared. Not the professor, course lead, or the head of our school. They all just left 30 students in the lurch, allowing them to potentially fail the exam and therefore the module. Story 4. The teachers who would spend half of the class time getting people to wear their uniforms correctly, in the UK by the way, and then not have enough time to cover all the topic for the day, usually leaving us severely behind or backed up with homework. No one cares that someone has to got their tie the right EFN length, or their shirt tucked in. What makes it more of a joke is they say not having uniform will cause distractions. Yet not once on a non-school uniform day did we have anything like that happen. I was one who did wear the uniform correct, and was one of the top in the class. Problem was other people did not have their uniform right and would complain the top button hurt their neck or the tie stopped them breathing and all sorts of stupid things. So again, to clarify, I couldn't get my education in some classes because the teachers were too busy sorting out other people's uniform issues. Story 5. The teacher gave us a piece of coursework that we had a month to do. We weren't the brightest bunnies at math in that particular class, just under average, but somehow every single student in that class decided we were going to go above and beyond to try and up our grade. We collectively pulled together and worked our asses off. Some of us going without sleep at times so we could work on it and provide help to the others, myself included. When we handed in our coursework, there was a pretty good feeling in the class. We thought we had done well and were pleased with ourselves. When we got our papers back, we all got higher grades than usual, and in many cases did even better than we hoped, myself included. Then the teacher informed us that the coursework was only mocked and didn't count for anything. We now had to do the real coursework in the span of 2 weeks. There wasn't a riot. Everyone just went quiet. We were collectively stunned in disbelief. No one said anything at all. We simply couldn't believe it. Over the next 2 weeks, I was pretty much crying every night. I'd burned myself out over the mock and was just too tired. I had also been recently diagnosed with CFS, which didn't help my concentration or mood at all. I wasn't the only one either. Everyone else was having issues, and all the camaraderie we had built up over the month previous just dissolved. Handed in my coursework after the fortnight was up, and then went and cried in the girls' toilets because I knew it was awful, especially compared to the mock I had been so proud of. The results from that were nearly all below our usual grades. I just about scrapped my old average. The teacher then rubbed salt in the wound by saying she was disappointed in all of us. No one had the energy to argue. We just took it. I think one person tried complaining to the head teacher afterwards, but nothing came of it. For extra injury, that teacher had several maths classes, but we were the only one she pulled that stunt on. Story 6. Oh, I've had so many. The first teacher was new to the school and taught us science in year 10. She was always 20 minutes late to class. She was a fun teacher, but our lessons were only 40 minutes. So we literally wasted half a lesson being late. Pissed me off, no end. Another teacher lost 2 years' worth of my science coursework, which I had to redo by the end of the week. That was 3 days. I'm surprised I got the grade I did, and she didn't help. And finally, the doctor. This one makes me laugh. I don't know how the rest of you address your teachers, but here in England, it's common to call them Miss and Sir, but not the latest science teacher in year 10. You had to address her as Doctor, followed by her name, which was incredibly close to a well-known vegetable, which we took advantage of. And if you didn't, she wouldn't answer or even acknowledge you. She asked if she could hit us, asked our parents if she could smack us upside the head, belittled us because we were public school kids. From rough areas, this was all within the week. Needless to say, we made her time hell, and she ran out of the school crying, leaving all her belongings except her handbag by Tuesday the following week. We didn't see her again. Oh, and every substitute ever, who thought they were God when they walked into the room. Story 7. So I just finished my high school. During my 4th year of high school, my class had this new German teacher who was totally unbearable. She kept shouting at everyone and giving bad notes too, without any proper reason. Once we had this test where only 2 people got at least 6, and all the others were insufficient, so everyone was already mad at her. But then she did the worst thing she could have possibly done. I took in my test a honest 4. Not too good in German, my fault. Although I tried to do my best nonetheless. Yet she calls me in front of everyone and she just says that I am retarded in the language because even if I study, I am a failure. Useless to say that everyone got pissed off at her as we were a very supportive class and started reporting her to the principal and started boycotting her lessons as well. From what I've heard, these things happened also in other classes and she in fact didn't get to renew the contract the later year, thankfully. But because of her, I stopped having interest in German. A language I studied for 7 years and other had the same effect. But now, I've got that interest back thanks to another good and supportive teacher. Moral of the story, bad teachers can really destroy the interest of one student into a subject. Story 8. Not my professor, but a friend of mine. His professor was going through some rough marital issues, and this started to reflect in his teaching, or their lack of. He'd be late almost every day, for the first half of the semester. Then there are days that he doesn't show up to teach and never bothered to inform the students. When he's able to inform the students of his absence, it's only a few minutes before class start. Again, imagine this happening constantly. for the first half of the semester, or close to that. Soon word got back to the higher-ups and he was promptly fired. The only problem, he didn't know he was fired and showed up to class. Imagine walking in 15 minutes late and seeing another professor standing there telling your student what's going to happen with the remainder of the semester. Well, he stayed there for about 10 minutes before making a quiet exit. The new professor, from what I heard, got most of the animosity because the students didn't want to readjust in order to fit his design for the class. From what I have heard, it was pretty simple stuff. Forget the old syllabus and use his, which mentions doing some new, simple assignments. Don't stress about the stuff you haven't done yet, and anything you have done already for the old professor will be counted towards your grade. Some student was still angered by this, but only one student got physically upset because he had done all of the assignments already. Just goes to show you can't please everyone. The student was told repeatedly that he, new professor, will take all works, including that ones he did, into consideration. The only difference was that he might count them as something less, like an extra credit assignment or quiz grade. This was what upset the student, as he wanted full credit for his work, regardless of what the other students felt. The entire class was now upset with him as he kept lecturing/complaining about this. They haven't started on this assignment yet, from what I'm told. Story 9. I'm glad I get to tell this story. In high school, I had a teacher for pre-calc who we will call Dr. B. She was the worst experience I've ever had with an educator, bar none. To this day, I still hate having taken that class. As a sophomore, I had never actually had a teacher who was credentialed to the point of having a doctorate. The only doctors I really knew about were medical doctors. So when I started this class, I often called her Mrs. B instead of Dr. B. Every time I used the wrong title when trying to speak with her caused her to ignore me completely. And not just me, but any student who did the same. As you can imagine, most kids had this problem initially. This led to an increasingly frustrating classroom environment, to the point where no one liked her and only spoke if they absolutely had to. I tried to get better at using the proper title, but I would occasionally make a mistake. Everyone hated dealing with her, and some kids would do it on purpose just to annoy her. One day, I had to use the restroom and I raised my hand to get her attention. She didn't see me at first, so I called her name. Mrs. B, can I use the restroom? This bitch looked me dead in the eye and then turned back to what she was doing, completely ignoring me. I was so goddamn angry I walked out and went to the restroom anyway. When I came back, she tried to write me up for leaving class. I just took the referral and tore it up, looking her dead in the eye. We had a bit of a standoff, you might say. A couple of my buddies were fighting to keep from laughing because I was never the rebellious type. So this was a treat for them. She let it go, so I figured that was that. When I got home, my mother asked me what happened. It turns out she called my mom about my discipline problem and said that would have to accept a referral the following day. I told my mom what happened and thankfully she understood. Most of my teachers loved me and never had problems. So this was not a normal situation. She said she'd take care of it. The next day I get called down to the office after the first period. And when I arrive, my mom is there with Dr. B, the principal, and a couple of other administrators. She then proceeds to go into crazy mom mode and basically tells them that any referrals written by this teacher would be ignored, and she would not force me into any kind of school or out-of-school detentions. It was one of my favorite mom moments. Things got a little better in class after that, but I still hated her and was happy when the year was over. Story 10. In high school, I had an extremely rigorous and intelligent physics and chemistry teacher. She actually had a PhD and was from Azerbaijan, so she had a very disciplined, very Soviet attitude toward education and high expectations. Also, interesting stories. Taught me more about math alone than 12 years of other educators had. She was respected and feared in our school, but she honestly was a great educator. Before our physics final, she gave us several days to sit in class and study. Since it was senior year, most of the students used that time to do absolutely nothing but goof around. Some pulled up movies on their laptops, others got into groups and started talking. Normally, she was a pretty strict disciplinarian, but she said nothing the whole time, which I found curious. Meanwhile, I'm actually very panicked about the physics final because S doesn't come naturally to me, so I'm sitting there studying in the corner. All of a sudden, after one group burst into a particularly raucous conversation, she stands up and announces that I alone will be exempt from the final because I am the only one using the time to study. All hell broke loose. Several students immediately protest that they've been studying. She just wasn't paying attention to them. Several other students just keep repeating that this must be a joke. Even the kids who are at the top of the class are infuriated. It devolves into this huge class argument, and meanwhile, I'm just sitting there in shock. I got along with most of my classmates just fine, and none of them were really mean to me, but there was a lot of anger. They bitched for the rest of the hour, and every class after that they would demand that she change her mind. Of course she did not. This was a woman who told us stories about learning to shoot Kalashnikovs in her high school gym class. She had very little tolerance for the candy-ass Americans who viewed education as a burden instead of a privilege. It was so out of character for her that I actually continued to study for the exam right up until the moment she told me that I wasn't taking it. I was not her favorite student. I was not the most intelligent student in that class, but I was disciplined, and I really valued my education. I think she saw all the other kids wasting time, lost her temper, and made a snap judgment. After I graduated, I found out I became sort of famous. New kids in her classroom would whisper about the one girl who got exempted from the final. Hopefully, it inspired them to shut the fuck up sometimes and read their books low. I forgot the most hilarious part. At one point, the future valedictorian and salutatorian of our class are both protesting her decision, and she looks up in and goes with a flip of her hand in her heavily accented voice. "Why do you protest so much? You are much better at physics than she is." To which I loudly said, "It's true. You are. I'm actually very stupid." She laughed really hard at that, and so did they.